My husband, Ethan, and I have always been that couple. You know the ones, matching sweaters at Christmas, a million inside jokes, and a love story that makes others roll their eyes. We met in college, fell in love almost instantly, and built a life together that seemed, for all intents and purposes, perfect. But looking back, I wonder if I had been so blinded by the picture-perfect version of us that I missed the cracks forming beneath the surface. It started with something small. Isn't that always the way? One ordinary Thursday, I was looking for a photo on Ethan's tablet. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, unlocked, and I figured it'd be faster than digging through my phone's camera roll. That's when I saw the notification. The message was from someone named Claire. I hesitated, telling myself I wasn't the kind of wife who snooped. But then I saw the preview text beneath her name. You make me feel like I can finally breathe again. My heart skipped a beat. My rational mind tried to step in, maybe it's innocent. Maybe she's a colleague going through a tough time. Maybe. But the knot forming in my stomach told me otherwise. Against my better judgment, I tapped on the message. What I found wasn't just a few texts between coworkers. It was an entire thread of messages, stretching back weeks, filled with inside jokes, pet names, and plans. Plans that didn't involve me. Ethan had always been open about his work. He's an architect, and long hours at the office or on-site visits were just part of the job. I'd never questioned his late nights or occasional weekend meetings. But as I read through his messages with Claire, I realized there was a part of his life I knew nothing about. Claire wasn't just someone he worked with. She was someone he confided in, someone he shared his dreams and frustrations with. She knew things about him, little quirks and preferences, that I thought only I knew. But what really unsettled me were their plans. We'll be so happy there, one of Claire's messages read. The fresh start we both deserve. Fresh start. Happy where? I scrolled further, my hands trembling. They were talking about moving. Together. To a house by the coast. Ethan had even shared sketches of what looked like a dream home, complete with annotations about things like, her favorite window seat and, perfect for morning coffee. Was this real? Was Ethan actually planning to leave me and start a new life with this woman? I put the tablet down and sat on the couch, trying to process what I'd just seen. My mind raced with a million questions, but one thought cut through the noise. When was the last time Ethan made me feel loved? I hadn't even noticed how distant we'd become. He still kissed me goodbye every morning and asked about my day every night. But those kisses had started to feel automatic, and his questions were always followed by distracted nods as he scrolled on his phone. How had I let this happen? By the time Ethan came home that evening, I had worked myself into a spiral of anger, sadness, and confusion. But as I watched him walk through the door, all my rehearsed accusations vanished. Hey, babe, he said, smiling as he set down his briefcase. How was your day? I stared at him, searching for any sign of guilt, but his expression was calm and easy. Was I really about to accuse my husband of cheating based on a few text messages? Instead, I played it cool. Fine. How was yours? Busy, he said, running a hand through his hair. But productive. I nodded, hiding the storm raging inside me. That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I wasn't proud of it, but I went through his emails, his calendar, even the notes app on his phone. Most of it was mundane, work deadlines, grocery lists, reminders to pay bills. But then I found something odd, a receipt for a piece of jewelry. A necklace. Purchased last month. I didn't own a necklace like that. As if the universe was conspiring against him, a package arrived later that week addressed to Ethan. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a photo album. At first, I thought it was for me, maybe an anniversary gift or a surprise. But as I flipped through the pages, my heart sank. The photos weren't of us. They were of Ethan and Claire. Laughing at what looked like a cafe. Walking along a beach. Posing in front of a house that matched the sketches I'd seen on his tablet. I was crushed. But just as I was about to call Ethan and confront him, I noticed something strange about one of the photos. It wasn't the beach or the house, it was the timestamp in the corner. The photo was dated 3 years ago. My mind reeled. 3 years ago, Ethan and I were celebrating our 5th anniversary. We'd gone on a trip to Italy. How could he have been with Claire at the same time? Something wasn't adding up. I decided to confront Ethan that evening, but not with accusations, at least, not yet. Instead, I asked him about his day, his work, and, as casually as I could, if he remembered anything about a project near the coast. His reaction was subtle, but telling. A flicker of something, fear. Guilt, crossed his face before he smiled and said, "Not really." "Why do you ask?" The way he avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was hiding something. Later that night, as I lay in bed, Ethan stepped out to take a phone call. I could barely hear him, but a few words stood out. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." My heart raced. Was he talking to Claire? What was he keeping up? I decided then and there that I needed answers. But what I found next would shake me to my core. The cryptic phone call lingered in my mind, replaying like a haunting melody. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. What exactly was Ethan referring to? Was he talking about Claire, or something else entirely? I needed answers, but the fear of what I might uncover kept me frozen. That all changed the next day when I received an unexpected email. The email came from an address I didn't recognize, unmaskedthetruth87@protonmail.com. At first, I thought it was spam. But the subject line stopped me cold. "Do you really know your husband?" My hands trembled as I opened the message. "You think Ethan is everything he claims to be, but he's not. Look closer at the house sketches. There's more to this than you realize." Attached to the email were the same sketches I'd seen on Ethan's tablet, complete with annotations about window seats and morning coffee. But this time, there was something new, coordinates scribbled in the corner of one page. I plugged the coordinates into Google Maps, my heart pounding as the location loaded. It led to a small, remote property about an hour outside of town. It wasn't near the coast like the texts with Claire had suggested, but the address looked eerily familiar. It wasn't until I zoomed in that I realized why. The house belonged to Ethan's parents, or at least, it used to. They'd sold it years ago after retiring to Florida. Why was Ethan sketching a house tied to his past? The next morning, while Ethan was at work, I decided to drive to the address. The property was run down and overgrown, its charm faded by years of neglect. I parked at the edge of the gravel driveway and hesitated. What was I even looking for? Proof of his affair? Clues about the strange plans he was making? I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under my weight, and peered through the window. The inside looked abandoned, dusty furniture, empty walls, a cobweb-covered chandelier. But something caught my eye, a single envelope sitting on the coffee table, as if it had been placed there recently. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I reached for the envelope, my heart racing. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "You're closer than you think. But are you ready for the truth?" My blood ran cold. Someone had known I would come here. But who? When Ethan came home that evening, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Ethan," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on with you?" He glanced up from his plate, feigning confusion. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped. The messages with Claire. The sketches. The old house. I know about all of it. His face paled, and for a moment, I thought he might deny everything. But then he surprised me. It's not what you think, he said quietly. Ethan admitted that Claire was more than just a colleague, but not in the way I'd suspected. She wasn't his mistress, she was his half-sister. The revelation left me reeling. Ethan explained that his father had had an affair years ago, resulting in a child, Claire, whom Ethan had only recently discovered. Their messages were about reconnecting and planning a way to introduce her to the family. And the house? I asked, still skeptical. It was our parents' house, Ethan said. Claire and I were talking about fixing it up. A way to honor where we came from. His explanation made sense on the surface, but something still felt off. Over the next few days, I tried to let Ethan's explanation sink in. But every time I replayed our conversation in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't telling me the whole truth. Why hadn't he told me about Claire sooner? Why keep the messages hidden? And why was someone leaving cryptic notes at the old house? Determined to get to the bottom of things, I returned to the house. This time, I searched more thoroughly, combing through every dusty corner. That's when I found it, a loose floorboard under the living room rug. I pried it up and discovered a small metal box. Inside were faded photographs, old letters, and a journal. The photos showed Ethan as a child, playing in the yard with a girl about his age. It had to be Claire. But one of the letters caught my attention. It was addressed to Ethan's father and read, "If you don't tell her the truth, I will." The journal belonged to Ethan's father, and its entries painted a very different picture of the family than the one I thought I knew. One entry in particular stood out. Claire's mother is demanding more money. She's threatening to come to the house if I don't pay her off. I've told Ethan to stay away from her, but I'm worried he's already getting too close. If Caroline ever finds out. The entry ended abruptly, but it was enough to send my mind spinning. Claire's mother had been blackmailing Ethan's father, and now, it seemed, Claire had taken up where her mother left off. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered hesitantly. "Caroline," a woman's voice said. "We need to talk." It was Claire. "What do you want?" I asked, my grip tightening on the wheel. "I think you already know," she said. "But if you want the full story, meet me at the cafe on Maple Street. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone." The call ended before I could ask any questions. My mind raced with possibilities. Was Claire trying to explain herself, or warn me? The next day, as I walked into the cafe, I spotted Claire sitting by the window. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "You're here," she said. "Start talking," I replied, bracing myself for whatever she was about to reveal. But what she said next changed everything I thought I knew about Ethan, and myself. Claire looked up from her coffee as I slid into the seat across from her. She didn't look like the woman I'd built up in my head, no villainous smirk or air of superiority. Instead, she seemed nervous, almost fragile, as if she'd been carrying the weight of a secret for too long. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," Claire said, stirring her drink absently. "I think you know exactly why I'm here," I replied, my tone sharp. "Why are you in contact with my husband? And why is he hiding it from me?" Claire let out a sigh. "It's complicated." For the next hour, Claire recounted a story that shattered the narrative Ethan had fed me. "Yes, Ethan and I are related," Claire began, her voice steady. "But half-siblings? That's what he told you?" She shook her head. "It's not true." My stomach twisted. "Then what's the truth?" Claire leaned in, her expression somber. "Ethan isn't just my brother. He's my twin." The word hit me like a brick. Twins? It didn't make sense. Ethan had never mentioned a twin, let alone a sister. How could someone so central to his life be completely erased from the version of him I thought I knew? Our father had a habit of keeping secrets, Claire said bitterly. When my mother and I left, he didn't just cut us off, he erased me from Ethan's life. He made sure Ethan believed I was some distant relative, not someone he grew up with. But Ethan told me you just reconnected, I said, my voice shaking. Claire gave a humorless laugh. He's lying. Ethan's known about me for years. We've been in contact this whole time. Claire explained that their father's manipulation had caused a rift in their family. She and Ethan had reconnected after their father's death, sharing stories and trying to piece together a childhood filled with half-truths and hidden agendas. But then things got complicated, Claire said, lowering her gaze. How? I asked, dreading the answer. Claire hesitated, then said, our father left us something. A property, and a secret that comes with it. That's why we've been meeting, Caroline. Not because we're having an affair, but because we're trying to figure out how to handle what he left behind. The property Claire referred to was the same one I'd visited, their old family home. But according to Claire, it wasn't just a childhood relic, it was tied to their father's illegal activities. Our father used that house to launder money, Claire said. There are hidden compartments, old safes, and documents that could ruin people's lives if they ever came to light. And Ethan knew about this? I asked, my voice trembling. Claire nodded. He found out after our father died. He's been trying to figure out what to do ever since. Claire dropped another bombshell. Part of the money their father had laundered was missing, millions of dollars. And according to Claire, Ethan was determined to find it. I don't think it's about the money for him, Claire said. I think it's about control. He wants to clean up our father's mess and protect you from finding out. But now I know, I said, the weight of the truth settling over me. Claire met my gaze. Exactly. So what are you going to do? That night, I confronted Ethan for the second time. I didn't give him a chance to deflect. Why didn't you tell me about Claire being your twin? I asked. Ethan's face fell, and for a moment, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. I didn't want to burden you with my family's mess, he said. So instead, you lied to me? I shot back. You made me think you were having an affair. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I know, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I know I should have told you. But I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I demanded. Ethan hesitated, then said, from what's coming. Ethan explained that Claire wasn't the only one who knew about their father's illicit activities. Others, former associates, creditors, even rivals, had started asking questions after their father's death. They think we know where the money is, Ethan said. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. What money? I asked, my frustration mounting. Ethan sighed. Our father laundered millions through that house. Most of it was accounted for, but a chunk of it vanished before he died. Everyone assumes we have it. Ethan revealed that their father had kept a journal detailing his operations, including clues about the missing money. But the journal had been stolen from the house weeks earlier. Claire and I have been trying to track it down, Ethan said. But whoever has it isn't making it easy. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I asked. Ethan looked at me, his expression pained. Because I didn't want you to get involved. I thought I could fix it on my own. Just as Ethan and I were beginning to piece things together, I received another email from the anonymous sender. You're closer than ever. But if you want to know the full truth, meet me at the train station tomorrow. Midnight. The message included a photo of the journal, the stolen journal. Ethan begged me not to go, but I couldn't ignore the chance to finally uncover the whole truth. The next night, I stood on the platform of the abandoned train station, the photo of the journal clutched in my hand. A shadow moved in the distance, and a figure stepped into the dim light. You came, the man said, his voice low. Now let's talk about what your husband isn't telling you. The man standing before me looked rough around the edges, greasy hair, a scruffy beard, and clothes that had seen better days. He exuded an air of caution, his eyes darting nervously as if he expected someone to leap out of the darkness at any moment. "You're Caroline?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I replied, gripping the photo of the journal in my hand. "Who are you? And how do you know about all this?" "They call me Sam," he said. "And I know because I used to work for your father-in-law. I was one of the guys who helped him hide his money." Sam wasted no time diving into the details. According to him, Ethan's father had been laundering money for years, using the family home as the hub for his operation. But before he died, he became paranoid, convinced someone within his circle was planning to betray him. "That's when he started writing everything down in that journal," Sam explained. "Every deal, every account, every betrayal, it's all in there." "And the missing money?" I asked. Sam smirked. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The journal has clues about where it went. That's why everyone wants it." Sam warned me that Ethan and Claire weren't the only ones looking for the journal. Other players in their father's network were circling, each hoping to claim the missing fortune for themselves. "Your husband thinks he can clean this up," Sam said. "But he doesn't realize how deep it goes. If you want to protect him, and yourself, you need to stay out of it." I frowned. "Then why did you bring me here? Why show me the journal?" "Because I need your help," Sam said, his voice lowering. "I know where the journal is, but I can't get to it alone." Sam proposed a plan that made my stomach churn. The journal was hidden in a storage unit on the outskirts of town, but it was being guarded by someone from their father's old crew. Sam claimed he could distract them long enough for me to slip in and grab it. "Why can't Ethan do this?" I asked. "Because Ethan's already on their radar," Sam said. "They won't expect you." It was a dangerous plan, but with the journal in our hands, we'd finally have the leverage we needed to end this nightmare. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The next night, Sam and I drove to the storage facility. The air was heavy with tension as we parked outside the dimly lit building. "You go in through the side," Sam instructed. "Unit 47. I'll keep the guard busy." My heart pounded as I crept toward the storage unit, the shadows of the tall buildings stretching around me like claws. When I reached Unit 47, I found the lock hanging loosely. Someone had already been inside. I pushed the door open, and there it was, the journal, sitting on top of a metal shelf. As I grabbed the journal, a voice behind me made me freeze. Well. Look who we have here." I turned to see a man stepping into the unit, his face partially obscured by a hood. His presence was menacing, his posture radiating control. "Who are you?" I demanded, clutching the journal tightly. The man chuckled. "Let's just say I'm someone with a vested interest in that journal. Hand it over, and I'll let you walk out of here." My grip on the journal tightened. "I don't think so." Before the man could respond, Sam appeared in the doorway, holding a crowbar. "Let her go," he growled. The man smirked. "This isn't over." He backed out of the unit and disappeared into the night. Sam ushered me out quickly, and we drove off before anyone else could show up. My hands shook as I clutched the journal, the weight of its secrets pressing down on me. Back at the motel, I opened the journal, eager to see what it held. The entries were written in a cramped, almost frantic script, detailing years of deals, betrayals, and hidden accounts. But one entry stood out. "The money's safe. Claire will never know where I hid it. Neither will Ethan." I froze. Their father hadn't just been hiding the money from his enemies, he'd been hiding it from his own children. The next morning, I showed the journal to Ethan and Claire. They were both shocked to see it, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. "This is it," Ethan said, flipping through the pages. "This is everything we need to put an end to this. Claire, however, seemed more interested in the entry about the hidden money. "If we can find it, we could finally be free of all this," she said. "Or you could make things worse," I countered. Just as we were debating our next move, my phone buzzed with another message from an unknown number. "Nice try, Caroline. But you're not the only one with a copy of that journal." Attached was a photo of a page from the journal, one I hadn't seen before. It listed a set of coordinates, and a single ominous phrase. "The truth is buried here." Ethan and Claire stared at the message, their expressions a mix of confusion and dread. "We have to go," Ethan said. "Are you crazy?" I shot back. "This could be a trap." "Maybe," Ethan admitted. "But if we don't follow this lead, we'll never know the truth." As we packed a bag and prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading straight into the lion's den. The drive to the coordinates was eerily quiet. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, while Claire sat stiffly in the back seat, clutching the journal like it was her lifeline. I sat in the passenger seat, my stomach twisting with every passing mile. The phrase from the message, "The truth is buried here," played over and over in my mind. The location was deep in the countryside, miles from the nearest town. As we turned onto a dirt road, the trees thickened, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. "Are we sure about this?" I asked, breaking the silence. "We have to be," Ethan replied. The coordinates led us to an old barn, its weathered exterior barely standing under the weight of time. Rusted farm equipment lay scattered around the property, and the air smelled of damp earth and decay. "This is it," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. We stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet echoing in the stillness. The barn door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking as Ethan pushed it open. Inside, the barn was dark and empty, save for a pile of old hay and a few broken tools. But as we ventured further in, we noticed something odd. A patch of the dirt floor had been disturbed. Claire knelt down and began digging with her hands, her movements frantic. Ethan and I joined her, clawing at the dirt until our fingers scraped against something solid. It was a wooden box, worn and splintered from years underground. With a deep breath, Ethan pried it open. Inside were stacks of old documents, photographs, and bundles of cash. But there was something else, a smaller box tucked in the corner. Claire reached for it, her hands trembling, and opened it to reveal a set of keys and a single note. The note read, "If you've made it this far, you know what to do. The answers lie at the lake." "The lake?" I asked, confused. "What lake?" "It's another property," Ethan explained, his expression darkening. "Our father used to take us there when we were kids. It's secluded, quiet, the perfect place to hide something." "But what's the connection to the journal?" I pressed. Claire held up one of the documents from the box. "It's a deed," she said. "To the cabin by the lake." As we drove to the lake, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, and every car that passed us felt like it was following. "This doesn't feel right," I said. "Nothing about this has felt right," Ethan replied. "But we're too far in to back out now." When we finally arrived, the lake was still and serene, its surface reflecting the overcast sky. The cabin sat at the edge of the water, its windows dark and uninviting. The keys from the box fit perfectly into the cabin's rusted lock. Inside, the air was stale, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with old books and trinkets. It looked like no one had been there in years. Claire immediately began searching, pulling open drawers and overturning furniture. Ethan joined her, while I lingered by the fireplace, my gaze drawn to a painting hanging above the mantel. The painting depicted a serene forest scene, but something about it felt off. I reached out and lifted the frame, revealing a small safe hidden behind it. "Guys," I called out. "I think I found something." Ethan used the keys from the box to open the safe. Inside was a single envelope marked with their father's initials. Ethan hesitated before opening it, his hands trembling. The envelope contained a letter and a photograph. The letter was addressed to both Ethan and Claire. If you're reading this, it means my sins have finally caught up with me. I won't ask for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. But know that everything I've done was to protect you. The money is at the bottom of the lake, sealed in a watertight case. If you choose to recover it, be prepared for the consequences. The photograph was of a spot on the lake, marked with an X. We have to get it, Claire said, her eyes shining with determination. Are you crazy? I snapped. If the money's in the lake, it's probably better off staying there. Do you know what kind of people will come after us if they find out we have it? She's right, Ethan said reluctantly. This isn't just about us anymore. If we take that money, we're putting a target on our backs. Claire shook her head. We've come this far. We can't stop now. Before we could decide what to do, headlights appeared outside the cabin, their beams cutting through the dusk. Someone's here, I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Ethan quickly closed the safe and motioned for us to hide. We crouched behind the kitchen counter as the cabin door creaked open. Footsteps echoed through the small space, heavy and deliberate. Whoever's here, you're not leaving with that money, a voice growled. The man stepped into the light, his face familiar from the photograph Sam had shown me of Ethan's father's old crew. You've caused quite a mess, he said, his eyes scanning the room. But it ends here. Ethan's hand tightened around a nearby fire poker, while Claire's gaze darted to the safe. I held my breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine everything. The man standing in the cabin radiated menace. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face lined with years of hard living. His gaze swept over the room, sharp and calculating, as though he could sense we were hiding. I know you're here, he said, his voice calm but laced with warning. And I know you've got the journal. Ethan crouched beside me, clutching the fire poker tightly. Claire's breathing was shallow, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the counter. I could feel my own heart hammering in my chest. I'll make this simple, the man continued. You hand over the journal, and I walk away. No one has to get hurt. Ethan motioned for us to stay put, then stood slowly, the fire poker in hand. We don't have the journal, he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. The man turned to him, raising an eyebrow. Don't insult my intelligence. I know you've been digging into your father's business. You found the journal, and now you think you can play hero. But trust me, you're in way over your head. Ethan took a step forward, keeping the poker raised defensively. If you're looking for the money, you're wasting your time. It's gone. Whatever my father left behind, we don't want any part of it. The man chuckled darkly. That's cute. But you and I both know the money isn't gone. It's in the lake, isn't it? Claire stood abruptly, her face pale but determined. If you know so much, why are you here asking us? You're just another piece of my father's mess, trying to clean up your own tracks. Her words seemed to hit a nerve. The man's smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. But this isn't a game. The people I work for aren't as patient as I am. If you don't give me what I need, they'll come looking, and trust me, you don't want that. We're not giving you anything, I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. So you can leave now, or you can wait for the police. The man laughed. The police? That's rich. Do you really think they can help you? Before anyone could respond, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. He held it up, and my blood ran cold. It was a picture of Ethan, Claire, and me, taken recently, at the old barn. We've been watching you, he said. And we know more than you think. So let me give you some advice, walk away. Leave the money where it is, and forget you ever found that journal. Ethan clenched his jaw, his grip on the fire poker tightening. And what happens if we don't? The man's smile returned, cold and sharp. Then your little family reunion here won't end well. The man took a step forward, but before he could close the distance, a noise outside distracted him. Headlights swept across the cabin, and the faint sound of tires crunching on gravel grew louder. Back up? Claire whispered, her voice filled with panic. Stay here, Ethan said, his voice low but commanding. But I wasn't about to let him face this alone. We need to go, I said urgently. Now. The distraction gave us the moment we needed. While the man turned toward the noise, we slipped out the back door, darting into the dense woods behind the cabin. The forest was pitch black, the thick canopy blocking out the moonlight. Branches scratched at my arms as we ran, the sound of our pursuers' footsteps growing louder behind us. You can't outrun me, the man called. You're only making this harder on yourselves. Ethan grabbed my hand, pulling me forward as we stumbled over roots and rocks. Claire was just ahead of us, clutching the journal to her chest like her life depended on it. We have to keep moving, Ethan said, his voice strained. But where? Claire asked, her breathing ragged. We're in the middle of nowhere. Just when it felt like we couldn't go any further, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. For a split second, I thought it was another enemy, but then I recognized the familiar silhouette. Sam. I gasped. Looks like you could use some help, Sam said, his tone calm but serious. He held a flashlight in one hand and what looked like a weapon in the other. This way. Without waiting for a response, he led us toward a narrow path that wound deeper into the forest. Sam guided us to an abandoned hunting cabin hidden among the trees. It was small and run down, but it provided a safe place to regroup. Care to explain what's going on? Sam asked, his gaze shifting between Ethan and Claire. We found the money, Ethan admitted. Or at least, we found where it's hidden. But this guy showed up, and he's working for someone who wants it too. Sam sighed, rubbing his temples. Of course he is. And if he knows you've got the journal, it's only a matter of time before more people come looking. We spent the next hour formulating a plan. Sam suggested we use the journal as leverage, offering to turn it over to the authorities in exchange for protection. It's the only way, he said. You can't keep running. These people will find you eventually. But what about the money? Claire asked. Sam shook his head. Forget about the money. It's more trouble than it's worth. For once, we all agreed. Just as we were preparing to leave the cabin, my phone buzzed with another message. It was from an unknown number, and its contents made my blood run cold. You think you're safe, but you're not. The lake isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning. I showed the message to Ethan and Claire, their faces mirroring my own dread. What does that mean? Claire whispered. I don't know, I replied, my voice trembling. But I think we're about to find out. The message lingered in my mind, its cryptic warning refusing to let me feel the slightest relief. The lake isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning. What could it mean? Claire asked, pacing the small cabin. The money's in the lake. We have the journal. What else is there? It's a warning, Sam said, his voice low. Whoever sent that wants you to know they're still in control. Ethan stood by the window, staring out into the dark forest. We need to go to the authorities, he said finally. Sam's right. We can't do this on our own anymore. But before we could make a decision, headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the trees like a knife. The vehicles came to a stop outside the hunting cabin, their engines rumbling ominously. Claire froze mid-pace, her face pale. It's them, she whispered. Ethan grabbed the journal and tucked it under his jacket. We have to hide. Sam shook his head. No time. They know we're here. The door burst open, and a group of men stormed in, their faces shadowed by the dim light. At their center was the man from the cabin, the one who had been chasing us. "Thought you could get away," he sneered, his gaze sweeping over us. "I told you, this ends tonight." Before the tension could explode, Sam stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Let's not do anything rash," he said, his voice calm. The leader's eyes narrowed. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Someone who knows how this works," Sam replied. "You want the journal. We want out. Let's make a deal." Ethan shot Sam a sharp look. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Trust me," Sam murmured. The leader crossed his arms, considering Sam's offer. "You give me the journal, and I let you walk away." "Exactly," Sam said. "You get what you came for, and we disappear. No one has to get hurt." The leader smirked. "You really think I'd let you go after everything you've seen?" Sam's calm demeanor didn't falter. "You don't have a choice. If you kill us, you'll never find the rest of the money." The man's smirk faded. "What do you mean?" "The journal doesn't have all the answers," Sam said. "But we do." The room grew tense as the leader weighed his options. Finally, he nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward to take the journal from Ethan. As the man opened it, his expression shifted from confidence to confusion. "Boss, he's right. There's no mention of the full amount. Just scattered notes about offshore accounts and a final, safe place." The leader's gaze snapped back to us. "Where's the rest of it?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "If you want the truth, you'll let us go." After what felt like an eternity, the leader motioned to his men. "Fine. You walk. But if I find out you've lied to me, I'll make sure you regret it." We didn't wait for him to change his mind. Grabbing what little we had, we hurried out of the cabin and into the forest. "You're insane," Claire hissed at Sam as we ran. "What if they didn't believe you?" "They did," Sam replied. "Because they're desperate. But we need to move fast. They'll come after us the moment they realize the journal's useless." As we reached the edge of the forest, Ethan stopped abruptly. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, his voice quiet. "What now?" I asked, exasperated. "The journal's final entry," Ethan said. "It mentioned a safe place. That wasn't just a metaphor. It's real." Claire's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated, then said, "Our father had a second property. A bunker. He told me about it years ago, but I never thought much of it until now. The bunker was hidden deep in the woods, camouflaged by overgrown vegetation and fallen leaves. Ethan led us to a hatch buried under a pile of debris, and with some effort, we managed to pry it open. Inside, the air was damp and musty, the walls lined with shelves of supplies and old equipment. At the center of the room was a metal chest, its surface covered in dust. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice heavy with emotion. Claire knelt beside the chest, her hands shaking as she opened it. Inside were stacks of cash, along with a sealed envelope. Ethan opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. As he read it, his face paled. "It wasn't just about the money," he said, his voice trembling. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Our father wasn't just laundering money," Ethan said. "He was hiding evidence. Records of illegal deals, bribes, even names of people in high places. This chest is a death sentence for anyone who touches it." Claire stared at the stacks of cash. "We can't just leave it here." "We have to," Ethan said firmly. "If this gets out, it won't just be us who's in danger, it'll be everyone tied to this." We faced an impossible decision: take the money and risk the wrath of powerful enemies, or leave it behind and walk away from everything. In the end, we chose to destroy it. Ethan and Sam worked together to burn the documents and scatter the ashes, ensuring no one could use the information to harm anyone else. As for the money, we left it behind, hidden in the bunker where no one would think to look. The next few weeks were a blur of moving, changing phone numbers, and cutting ties. Sam disappeared without a word, and Claire moved across the country to start fresh. Ethan and I stayed together, but our relationship was forever changed by what we'd been through. I no longer saw Ethan as the perfect husband I once thought he was. But in some ways, that was okay. We weren't perfect, but we were still standing. And for now, that was enough.